it feels to me like just being good at chess, unless you're in the top few guys, how much money can someone realistically make if they're the 50th best chess player in the world?
Yeah, so I would say if you're outside of the top 25, you're not really going to make a great living playing. The way that you make your revenue is primarily from teaching. There are a handful of places like New York City, I would say, is one of them. There are places like Dallas, Texas, is another one. Maybe Arizona, like Tucson. There are a handful of places where you can probably make, I would say, about $150,000 a year teaching chess, which is very good. Or a little bit more than that. So that's if you're outside. Now, if you're in, let's just say you're trying to play professionally and you're number 50 in the world. I would say if you do really well, there are what we call league events. So you play for like a week in like France or a week in Germany. There are maybe 4 to 5 of these leagues a year. You might make about, let's just say 8 to 10,000. You're going to make, I would say, not more than about $75,000 a year. And that's probably with a couple things breaking the right way too. And then,
Tough.
yeah, and then if you're in the top 20, let's just exclude Magnus because he's the world champion. Most players probably have like one private sponsor, and then they make most of their money from playing in the specific invite-only tournaments. I would guess they all make about, I would say on average, about $250,000 a year. I will say one thing that is interesting to me is that in chess, a lot of the top chess players are not great at poker. And I think that's probably directly because in chess, there's so much more information. It's much more like a complete information game that even though you're thinking ahead and you're trying to plan strategies, you also have to have a lot of self-confidence. And I think that in poker, you have to have that too, but you still have to be objective. And I think in chess, as you get to the upper bound, sort of like the top 20, top 30 players in the world, that self-confidence sort of sometimes will overtake it because you expect good things to happen. In chess, you make good moves, good things will happen. In poker, you can make the right move and still lose. And that, I think, is why you don't actually see a lot of the very top chess players playing poker that much, at least not professionally.
Can you talk about your experience playing poker, how you first found it, some games you played, what you enjoyed?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty funny. I think my first interest in poker began when I was going on family vacations, and my stepfather actually taught my brother and I how to play. We would play like Stud 8 and also eventually No Limit Hold'em, and that's sort of the initial interest. And then when I was a little bit older, I played a chess tournament in Gibraltar. I think this was 2000, and I'm gonna say it was like 2006 or 7, somewhere around there. And I knew nothing actually. I mean, I basically just knew the betting action. That was it. But they had a poker tournament up at the casino there, and I think it was like 40-pound buy-in, one rebuy, one add-on, and so I went to the casino at like 9 o'clock, just playing, knowing very little, and I ended up winning that whole tournament for like £3,000 or £4,000. And that kind of got me into it to where I started playing online, and I read Super System, and then I also read Harrington's books. Now nowadays, of course, that's not even basic knowledge. That's what nobody even reads that stuff anymore. But yeah, I like that. I played quite a bit of tournaments. I think the thing is actually because I play chess where the risk reward is very much if you play well, good things happen. I didn't like the uncertainty so much, and I felt within the tournament situation, generally there's going to be a right player. You can make what is perceived to be the right play. Whereas I feel like in cash games, obviously my knowledge is pretty basic, so I might sound really stupid saying this, but I feel like there are different scenarios.
Sorry, just to jump in. I mean, I've been talking chess with you for 15 minutes. I think it's good to get the shoe on the other foot here.
Sure, yeah. So like, I mean, I always felt like, the uncertainty difference for me, like when I played poker or played cash games specifically, that uncertainty of not really knowing, it always kind of made it hard for me to be objective and make the right play. Because I was actually worried about just like, I was sure that if I have a middle pair or something, I'm pretty sure I'm good. I didn't quite know how to basically evaluate it correctly versus just like making an emotional reaction. The thing that's really difficult with AI is that when computers play against each other, we see a lot of different opening strategies that are very unique, which humans don't play. And so when computers play each other, they're playing these different strategies and the games are very fascinating. But for humans, a lot of these moves don't really make sense. Like based on our understanding of the game, we can't play the same way. So because of that, even though computers are showing us that pretty much all opening strategies and pretty much almost any position for that matter is playable, regardless of how bad we think it is, we still have these limitations. And so that's why what happens is because of that, if someone studies a game or studies an opening strategy, they can blow someone off the board. And what that does is then as humans, we don't actually try to explore and be more creative. We try to actually shut it down and play something where there's no risk at all, and we'll be able to make the draw, especially when we're playing with the black pieces. And so that's why in the World Championship match, you're seeing these strategies where the game gets very dry. It's symmetrical pawn structures. Pawns are like very similar for both sides. And you don't really have a lot of exciting results. And so it's been great because it's shown us how little we really do know versus how much we don't know. But at the same time, because of that, when you lose games in some of these very aggressive openings, you actually trend the other way where we just don't want any of that. And that's much different than like when Garry Kasparov, for example, who's one of the modern pioneers of opening strategy, when he would play with either the white pieces or the black pieces, he would go for broke no matter what. He would try to win with both colors. He'd be very, very aggressive. But nowadays with computers, they're very specifically, I'll just use one opening. There's a Sicilian Najdorf, and it was his trademark opening. And I have played it quite a few times over the course of my career, but the last couple times that I played it, I simply lost a game where my opponent had looked at the entire variation with a computer before the game. So I tried to play something creative, and I got punished for the creativity, which is why chess is moving in this direction.
But in that example, isn't that so? So in that example, he knows that you play that opening some, right? Or at least that's a common opening. So
Right.
while maybe it's creative within your repertoire, perhaps it's not that creative in the grand scheme of openings. What do you think about that?
Yeah, actually, you're right. In the grand scheme, it's not. It's just considered a way of trying to play something imbalanced so that you have chances to maybe win the game. And that's the reason players sometimes try to play like that. But that's also where sort of the odds and statistics come into play, and why if you're not in a situation where you have to play like that, generally you don't take those risks. It's very much you try to play very controlled, and that's actually what I see as being the biggest issue with top level chess is that players, because they have these very bad experiences where they lose a game like this, where their opponent essentially prepared the whole game from start to finish at home, players are trying to be extremely solid. And as it keeps going that direction, there comes a point where sort of the lack of like real creativity, there isn't a lot left. The only thing that I think is difficult in chess is that because the market is so small. Like I think was it Mike McDonald? I think he did a tweet where he was going to bet like 350K on Magnus against whoever wanted to take Jan. But the one problem is, and there are a lot of people trying to get betting in chess to become a real thing or a real market. The one problem is because the prize funds are so small. There can be a lot of manipulation potentially, which is the one other big issue. I think if you have more money in chess to where the prize funds are significantly larger, then betting could become a very serious add-on or component that really blows the game up more than it is at the moment.
I totally agree that betting would change the landscape for chess. And it would add a lot of money to prize pools, and it'd be very good for the players. And an analogy that I would give is video games, top tier video games, unless you're the top guy, you're not making that much money. And of course, they have had match fixing scandals and stuff, but
Right.
there are ways to detect things, and you can do your best to try and keep the games fair. And the problem with throwing in chess would be you would take a hit on your elo, and then you might not, for the top guys anyway, risking not getting invited to some of these tournaments would be.
I mean, I guess what I would say about that though is, again, if you have, let's just say if you can put $100,000 on the line and make like 200,000 or 300,000, like that's a lot of money. That's more than you're going to make in a year or even 2 years. So that's kind of the one drawback. I mean, when the derivative is more than the actual market, I mean, I think I saw someone post that on Mike McDonald's tweet. That's really the danger to it. That's the only problem. But I think if you can get more sponsors and you have bigger prize funds, then and you can add gambling, and that would be another way for chess to have a huge boom.
There's a lot of chatter about time controls in chess and the current format in the World Championship. And I guess I would just open with, do you think that the current structure today is fine, or do you think change is needed?
I think change is needed, and I know that this match, when there was a decisive game number 6, which Magnus won, the match became very open and very exciting. But when you look at the previous 2 World Championship matches, which Magnus won, he won them in tiebreaks. So he won the match in games which were not played at the classical time control. And I feel that when you have a victor being declared from another format, essentially, that isn't right. So I don't know what the format is. Personally, I think they should probably just mix all the formats together. I think that at the end of the day, chess is chess, and whether you have 5 minutes or 30 minutes or you have 2 hours, the game itself is the same. And so personally, I think they should mix the formats rather than try to separate and have individual world championships per se for every format. That's what I would say. I think it fundamentally is broken at the moment.
I see what you're doing here. You're trying to get some speed chess into the championship. No, I see you. You thought you were just gonna fly under the radar, guys. Let's get some bullets, some rapid. This will be great. No, it's just good for the game. This is good for everybody. I have this take on gambling and investing that investing is just the word gambling dressed up nicely, because the reality is anytime that you put your money into something expecting to get money back, it's an investment, but it is also a gamble. There's risk. So people make a distinction between those two words, and they try and make the investing sound nice and the gambling sound bad. But the reality is you should be taking your money and trying to put it into places where it has a positive return. You can call that gambling, you can call that investing, you can call it whatever you want. But if you're consistently making those good bets or placing your money well, you'll make money in the long run. So they're really just kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only reason people say that is because if you look at the stats, if you put money in like a S&P, you know, some index fund over 30 years, like there's like maybe one period of time over 30 years where you lost money. So I mean, but the thing is now when I look at investing specifically, it's very much all about stock picking. It's not about actually buying index funds and keeping it plain vanilla. Like everyone's talking about AMC or GameStop or all these different
Meme
companies.
stuff.
Yeah, and it is very, very pure gambling. And I mean, I'm also not one to talk. So I do a lot of stuff with options, which 100% is pure gambling. So, I mean, fundamentally, I agree with you. I think it's just people say that because if you do it a certain way, it is. But most people are individually picking stocks. I think it's because, especially nowadays, we all want to believe that we know best. Like we all want to believe in ourselves to make the right decisions.